Welcome to MyPodClass, where faculty and students share perspectives on college teaching and learning. My guest again today is Michelle Delaney, my colleague, an all-around great person, an actual graduate student. Today's topic, what's troubling college students? Thanks again, Michelle. First, I want to make sure everybody understands that I don't like the term millennials. And the reason I don't is because I don't like sweeping stereotypes. For example, aging college faculty are referred to as the gray tsunami. My hair is actually white. Having taught for 30 years, I believe students remain unique, each looking for an opportunity to learn. So let's think about the barriers to learning that students face in everyday classrooms. So we've talked about this general model that says here are the pieces that kind of fit together in the inputs and the outputs of a classroom. Well, today our focus needs to be on the student component, and that's what we're after. And so what Michelle and I have kind of thought about is the possibility that some faculty will actually think of folks as faceless pieces inside of their classroom, or what one of my colleagues said was willow tree people. But ultimately, they have a whole bundle of issues that they bring into the classroom every day. And so the ones we kind of came up with are all built around student anxiety. And so I had thought about things individually, and Michelle kind of added the component that said, well, this all sounds like anxiety that I see in my friends and in things that I've tended to do. And so if that's kind of the overarching umbrella, what I wanted Michelle to do today was kind of talk about how she sees these 6 items, starting from having the money and the access to the classes, all the way around these 6, and give us some ideas on when you see these phrases, how do you see those in terms of your classroom experience and that of your friends. So let's start with just what's the pressure that you and your friends now see when it comes to just access to classes and the cost of the education that students are trying to get?
Well, access can all vary depending on the university, of course, to the classes, whether it's with scheduling or different requirements to take them. But I feel like the monetary access to education in college in general is something that is talked about on a daily basis, whether it's in politics or just a day-to-day conversation with people and their families.
So do students talk about it amongst themselves?
I'd say not as much, but definitely a little bit. Yes, it is brought up, I'd say.
So it's kind of in the back of their mind. It's not right in front. But
yeah.
One of the challenges that we talked about was, do you think it increases a kind of responsibility they think they might have to their parents?
Oh, I would say so. I definitely would. I mean, everyone obviously has different situations with their access to school and whether or not they're getting help for the payment side of things. So I think it definitely is on a lot of people's mind, but obviously people have different outlooks on it.
And so the next one I see a lot is this idea of overconfidence. So as we move around our circle into these magic clouds of anxiety, overconfidence is always a barrier to learning because students think that they may know more than they actually know. That's actually a very the result of a famous study by Kruger and Dunning. But we'll get to that in probably the second episode of this general discussion. So to what extent do you see this in your classes and the way students either prepare or think about learning something new?
I think overconfidence is definitely something that students face, whether it's, oh, I remember learning that in high school, and then you actually go to the day that the professor's teaching it, and you're like, wow, I don't remember 1 ounce of that. I just remembered that I learned that title of something.
So tell me your example of the software Python. You were talking about that, and I went, oh, that makes sense to me. So explain that high school experience.
So this year for my master's, we just started learning Python last week in class, and our professor had asked us who had seen Python before, known anything about it, and I, of course, was like, oh, I took a Python class junior year of high school. And I was telling Professor West a funny story that I texted my friend from high school that I took the class with, recalling the nights we sat at her dining room table trying to figure out our Python homework, struggling so hard we had to try and call some of our parents' friends who did know Python. And that definitely was some overconfidence in myself, saying that I knew my Python still since junior year.
So this is one that continues to resonate and can affect students if they're trying to keep up their look of confidence, yet they're starting to see their study capability or what they know slip away underneath them. So another thing that happens is this idea of we tend to seek perfection. How does that manifest with some of your friends?
I'd say seek for perfection definitely affects people when it comes to the time of exams. People really stress out over getting a great grade or just a result on a paper or something like that. That's where I feel like I would see it most in the search for perfection.
So you're kind of it's focused on kind of the outcome piece?
Yes.
Okay. So then that takes us around next to past experiences students may have had or are currently having when they come to your classroom. So what are we kind of thinking about in that area? How do past experiences, just like your Python example, how do past experiences then affect perhaps the anxiety you have going into class?
I think past experiences could affect it in the sense that you learned it one way briefly, and then a professor could be teaching it in a different way or adding more depth to a topic that you only learned the basic of. So you think that you have a good background on it, but there's obviously a lot more you can expand upon and learn.
Yeah, I think one of the things I see is just differences in their study skills.
Yes.
We bring a lot of people from different backgrounds into our classes, and their study skills just come from all different places, and so they tend to stick with the study skills that brought them, and that may be something that's not good enough when they get into a new course with some new material.
Definitely.
So let's talk about this loss of control, and the example that I tend to give is for students that are coming in out of high school. If they were a high performer in high school, there's a high probability that they essentially ran their high school. They could get away with anything as a senior, and now they've had this opportunity to come into the college classroom, and they're no longer in control. They can't get away with all the things that they could previously. Have you ever had a friend or colleague that thought that was a thing?
Definitely. I feel like some people definitely had more freedom in where they went to high school than some professors in college have just within the classroom, whether it's leaving class or being on your computer the entire time and trying to multitask but then not participating. People just come in with different backgrounds that it is a big change when they go into a college classroom and see a professor has different standards.
Yeah, the switch from that whole idea of what your standards are is a real rough road, and don't underestimate that. Then our final piece is something called mindset. I've actually done some research in that with my colleagues, and this is actually driven by a person by the name of Carol Dweck out at Stanford. And so the idea of mindset, let's just move forward and take a look at that real quick, has two components: a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. The one I see most often is this fixed mindset. So Michelle, if you can just talk about these really briefly and say, do you see these or not? So when you were talking about perfection, it's pretty much outcomes focused.
Outcomes focused, definitely. The motivation, or motivated by need to validate existing beliefs of self. That's also reflected in that, I'd say. Assess performance relative to classmates. I would also see that going towards perfection. I feel like a lot of that, the looking for the perfection is based off of performance relative to classmates.
Yeah, one of the things I always ask in my class is do you ever compare or ask another student how you did on an exam. And most people say yes, and so I ask why. Are you asking to make the other person feel better, or are you trying to make yourself feel better? Anyway, that really tends to cause people to stop and think about why they're really asking the question. Confidence?
I feel like that's definitely a big piece in student anxiety.
Does it get better over time, or is it always kind of tenuous? I know it depends on the person.
Yeah, I'd say it depends on the person, but I'm not sure.
Okay. And then we tend to avoid negative feedback. And then finally, dealing with failure. That one's tough.
That's definitely tough. And I feel like that also has to do with the whole what your background is. I feel like a lot of people in high school have a little sheltered view and don't necessarily always get to see the failure part, but when you come to college, class is a lot of hard. It's just a different experience. So people seem to experience different things, and I feel like that really affects self-esteem.
Yeah, and so this is our general lay of the land, if you will, in terms of anxiety. We're going to get into these topics a little bit more in our second episode, but that's kind of setting the stage and getting people to think that, yeah, every individual, every student's an individual that may bring this bundle of factors to the table. So we will talk to you again in our next episode, but have a great day. Thanks for joining us.